In this lesson I'm going to take a look at two of the most important panels in Dreamweaver. The Property Inspector, which is this large panel at the bottom of the screen, and the Insert panel, which usually lives among the panels on the right. The main purpose is to clear up some areas of confusion, particularly among people who've upgraded from an older version of Dreamweaver. I've got open here in the document window an unstyled page. Attached to the page is a style sheet that's got a few basic styles. A class called float left for floating images to the left, another one called float right to float images to the right, and an ID selector called wrapper, which will make the page 650 pixels wide and center it. Because I've selected the style sheet, the Property Inspector is now greyed out, but if I put the focus back into Design View, the Property Inspector comes alive again. On the left-hand side of the Property Inspector are two buttons, HTML and CSS. At the moment I'm in HTML mode, so what I'm going to do is turn this paragraph at the top into a level 1 heading. Put the cursor anywhere inside the paragraph and then select from the Format menu Heading 1. Now let me just switch to the HTML source code and you can see that it's inserted H1 tags. And I'm going to turn this paragraph into a level 2 heading by putting the cursor in anywhere inside the paragraph and selecting Heading 2 from the Format menu. Again, you can see that it's added H2 tags inside the HTML. To add italics to a piece of text, just select it in Design View and click the Italics button down here in the Property Inspector. As you can see in split view, it's added I tags. Now that's because I've changed the default setting in Dreamweaver to use I tags instead of M tags. If you use the default setting in Dreamweaver, it will insert M tags instead. However, the recommendation for HTML5 is to use I and B tags for italics and bold. Let's now switch to the CSS mode of the Property Inspector. It looks superficially similar because of some common buttons, particularly the bold and italic buttons here. But the first thing that confuses many people is that there's no link field. That's in the HTML section. Links are created with HTML. The CSS mode of the Property Inspector is for CSS only. You can see the difference immediately if I select a piece of text and then try to add italics to it here. What happens is that Dreamweaver launches the new CSS Rule dialog box. It prompts me to create a class for italics. If you don't want to create a class for italics, you need to go back to the HTML mode. I don't want to create a class for italics at the moment, so I'll just cancel. To set a style rule for paragraphs, select the P in the tag selector at the bottom left of the document window, and then select Font here in the Property Inspector. I'm going to use a sans serif font, Lucida Sans Unicode. Dreamweaver launches the new CSS Rule dialog box. By default it wants me to create a class, but I don't want to create a class, I want to apply it to all P tags. So if I select Tag, it automatically selects the P tag there, and to make sure that my new rule is defined within my style sheet, select from Rule Definition the name of the style sheet and click OK. And as you can see, what's happened is that it's applied the font to all the paragraphs in the page, not just the one that I had selected. Now let's say that I want to make the first paragraph bold. If I put my cursor inside there and select the P in the tag selector and then select the bold icon from the Property Inspector, look what happens. It hasn't turned the first paragraph bold, it's turned all paragraphs bold. The reason for that is targeted rule shows P. That means it's going to affect every paragraph within the page. That's obviously not what we want, so to undo it, click the bold icon to remove the property from the style. If you wanted to create a style just for the first paragraph, of course you would need to create a class for it, or use one of the more advanced selectors that will be covered later in the course. Now let's say you want to change the font for the headings. Put the cursor inside one of the headings And you now see that targeted rule has changed to new CSS rule, so it's not going to affect the paragraphs. Select default font here, and let's go for a serif font this time. Which one should we choose? Palatine or Linotype? And what it does is it brings up this new CSS rule dialog box again. It still wants me to create a class, but in fact what I would rather do is to create a style rule for both the H1 and H2. So change selector type from class to compound, and then it prompts me with body H1. Well, I wanted to affect both the H1 and H2, but I don't really need the body to be there, so I'll click less specific and then put my cursor in here, type a comma, then H2, and that will apply the rule to both H1 and H2. Rule definition still has my style sheet selected, so I just click OK, and there we are. The font has been changed in the H1 and H2 headings, but it's left the paragraphs with their original font. And let's say I want to change the color of the headings. My targeted rule still says H1, H2, so if I click the color box here and choose a color, let's take OC3, a green color there, the color of both headings has been changed, and if I were to add any other headings, they would also be changed because I have a style rule which has already been created for them. Now let's take a quick look at the insert panel. If you would prefer to have the icons in the insert panel always showing in color, click the common menu here and select color icons from here. And now your icons are in color, which to me makes them more easily recognizable. I'm going to insert an image, so select images. The first time that you select an item which has got one of these little down arrows next to it, you get a little pop-up menu giving you a range of options. I'm going to choose image. That opens the select image source dialog box, and I'll navigate to my folder and select an image, and then click OK. This brings up the image tag accessibility attributes dialog box. If you don't want to give your image alternate text, you can just select empty from here, and what that does is it inserts an alt attribute with just a pair of empty quotes. Click OK. Now you can see what's happened here is I've not been careful where I had my insertion point at the time that I inserted the image. This is one of the few cases in which you can drag and drop within Dreamweaver, so I'm going to drag it to the beginning of this paragraph here and then apply the float left class to it, which I can get from the class menu in the property inspector. And as you notice, the property inspector is context sensitive. Now it's showing me the properties for the image. The property inspector shows me text related properties. To wrap the whole page in a div and center it, select body in the tag selector and then insert div tag from the insert panel. This opens the insert div tag dialog box, which recognizes that I have a selection and I want to wrap around it, and I've got an ID already defined within my style sheet. If I just click the down arrow here for ID, it recognizes it. I can select wrapper and then click OK. And if I go back into full design view, you can see that I have a div wrapped around the whole content of the page, and it's now centered. The insert panel has quite a few categories. If I open this here, you can see we have layout, forms, data, spry, jQuery mobile. In context editing, that is used only with Business Catalyst, which is not covered by this course. But if we take a look at text, you can see that we have there bold and italic. Because I've changed the default way that Dreamweaver inserts M and strong tags, the bold and italic will insert B and I tags, whereas strong and emphasis will insert strong and M tags. You'll probably use the insert panel on a regular basis. The property inspector is also useful for setting common HTML attributes, but for CSS and HTML5, the CSS styles and tag inspector panels offer much greater functionality. They're the subject of separate videos.